Mercedes doesn't seem to be stopping anytime soon in terms of upgrading their car, especially after the trouble they went through after the first race in Bahrain. The Silver Arrows are struggling to understand why the no-pod sidepod design isn't functioning well, but it seems like they've decided to move forward with the new concept of the car. The team is looking to be competitive in the upcoming weekend in Jeddah, and it seems like they are going to complete their plans thanks to the upgrades they are having. What is going on in Brackley in terms of upgrading the W14? Could we hear the British anthem at the end of the GP? And is there any way Hamilton could remain with the team after the fiasco of 2023? Mercedes finished 50 seconds behind Red Bull in the first race of the season in Bahrain, and that fact itself shows how far behind the team is in terms of development and race pace. However, one thing that we've learned about Bahrain is that the track is very unique, and usually if a team performs badly here, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be bad throughout the entire season. It goes the other way as well, as we've seen Ferrari finish 1-2 here last year and then go on to experience one of the worst seasons of their existence. But this also had many other reasons. The Brackley-based squad hasn't been particularly good here, quite the contrary. It was one of the worst racing weekends, as Toto Wolff labeled it. However, Bahrain is a circuit that requires a medium amount of downforce from the cars, something that turned out to be too big of a challenge for Mercedes' 2023 competitor. What this eventually means is that the cars that aren't able to generate much downforce, like the W14, tend to brake earlier and accelerate later, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do on a track full of medium and high-speed corners. The Mercedes car showed to be a very unstable one, and tracks like Bahrain tend to highlight this problem more compared to any other track out there, given the abrasive asphalt on top of every other challenge that was to be overcome in Bahrain. Even though everyone expects the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix to have the same pecking order, Wolff hopes that the checkered flag will see one of his two drivers come through it first, with the new upgrades boosting the chances of the W14 being more competitive. But the failed design of Mercedes doesn't really allow them to be immediately competitive after losing 50 seconds compared to Red Bull, and the question remains, what is wrong with the design of the W14? In short terms, the sidepod design has been interpreted way too strictly by the Silver Arrows, and the airflow that goes through it, which is designed to direct air inside the car and keep the engine cool, just isn't doing the trick for Mercedes. The Silver Arrows went with this design through the entire 2022 season, and while they hoped that the tweaks to the regulations for the 2023 season would help them be more competitive, all they got in return was a car that's not bouncing. You'd think that after the gruesome campaign they'd gone through, this would be more than enough to be competitive, right? Well, you thought wrong, because now Mercedes has a car that's very unstable and lacks a lot of speed thanks to the increased drag. All of these issues come from the design of the car, and for those of you who are asking, why doesn't Mercedes find a quick cure for it? The answer is simple. It's not just one thing that makes the car slow. It's a combination of everything the team did up until this point. That's why they're opting for the new design, no matter how painful this decision was to be made. And at this point of the season, the team has no option but to leave everything they thought they knew about the 2022 technical regulations and start everything from scratch. However, that doesn't mean we aren't going to see a competitive W14 in Jeddah and Australia, and one of the things that the Silver Arrows are going to hope for a lot to boost their hopes to win races is the surface and the entire nature of the upcoming GP in Jeddah. If you compare Jeddah and Bahrain, you'd end up with two tracks that are massively different in terms of downforce requirements and track surface. For example, Jeddah rarely has medium and high-speed corners, which tend to get the most out of the tires wear and the downforce generation of the 2023 Challengers. The better the car is at generating downforce, the more stable it will be in entering and exiting these types of corners due to the fact that it will be able to brake later and accelerate earlier without losing the stability of the car. This is where Verstappen has been able to gain the most amount of time compared to the rest of the grid, and even though he wasn't the fastest car compared to everyone else in terms of straight-line speed, this is what gave him the chance of beating everyone else. On top of that, cars that tend to have better downforce generation are softer on their tires due to the fact that the load put on the tires in corners like this is much lighter, which results in less rubbing being wasted by the tires. This is everything that the W14 had, but on the opposite side of things. That is why Jeddah, a track that is full of corners that don't actually require the driver to take the pedal off the throttle, is going to suit the W14 much more. On top of that, the abrasive asphalt in Bahrain, which hasn't been replaced since the track was introduced to the F1 calendar back in 2004, is not going to be nearly the same in Jeddah, with the latter being only 2 years old. Toto Wolff spoke about the opportunities that Mercedes have in the upcoming GP, as he added, "This weekend in Saudi Arabia we will learn more about W14, its characteristics and its limitations. It provides a very different test to Bahrain, and it will be interesting to see how the car reacts. We're bringing some small developments to the car. They won't be game changers, but they can start moving us in the right direction." Furthermore, Wolff said that upgrades in terms of 0.3 per second won't be considered good ones, because the team lacks so much pace now. 0.3 of a second doesn't actually mean too much to them anyway. Many would consider this attitude to be very arrogant and derogatory towards the working crew that is likely putting in overtime work to bring the W14 where it needs to be. But this is the reality, and we need to live in it. At least that's what Mercedes told us through an official letter on their website. What gives us a lot of hope that Mercedes will be competitive in Jeddah and in the upcoming races as well is that the Brackley-based squad brought back a familiar name in James Allison, the former technical director of the team, who served in that role from 2017 to 2021 before being replaced by Mike Elliott. Allison left the team in 2021 in order to join the sailing Ineos UK team, but now that he's much more needed in Mercedes F1, it seems like the team understood that if they want to progress further, they need the mind that stood behind the W11, one of the most dominant cars to ever be produced in the sport. It seems like Allison already has his fingerprints all over the upgrades that are bound to happen to the W14 from Imola onwards, and he has already given his input on the small upgrades that Mercedes brought to Jeddah. Will this be enough to keep Hamilton on board? The 7-time world champion is definitely not in a happy place right now, and the last thing he needs is to be the bright spot of the team for the second consecutive season after the 2021 season proved to be too big a bite to take from him and his team. Therefore, rumors have started about him possibly departing from Mercedes for a team that could provide him with a decent car to win that record-breaking championship, one that seems so challenging yet so distant for the Briton. One thing about Hamilton is that he is very loyal and very committed to a project, but it seems like his loyalty and patience are nearing an end, especially after he gave the team his personal input on the W13 and the W14, and they didn't listen to him for the sidepod design, as they opted for the no-pod sidepod design. Therefore, the small changes made to the W14 in Jeddah guarantee that the car will be competitive, but whether it will be able to get the highest place on the podium, only time will tell. With Mercedes bringing new upgrades soon, and them trying out different setups in the next few races, they might eventually understand why their car is performing so badly, and then use that as inspiration for the new concept. Even though they made a great comeback last year, it would be better if their whole concept in general is a lot better than it is now. With that in mind, what do you think about the upgrades that Mercedes brought to Jeddah? Do you think that it will be good enough to challenge Red Bull, Aston Martin, and Ferrari? Or do you think that the Bahrain pecking order won't be changed after all? Let us know in the comments below. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.